Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone. This is Brian Neubert from GoldandBlack.com, live on tape delay in a hotel room in Birmingham, Alabama. I believe this is a Hilton Garden Inn. It's a Hilton something. I didn't look at the sign on the way in, and I just followed the GPS here after I made the reservation on Hotels.com. This is your GoldandBlack.com Saturday Simulcast. It's only me this week because we figured it would be better to just cut out the middlemen. On my schedule here, covering basketball all day, it made sense for me to just kind of bang this out myself. So for the next 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes, I'm going to talk about Purdue basketball recruiting here, probably in a very scattershot manner, because after I fiddled around with this hotel room trying to get front lit here, that's a technical term in the profession that we use to mean light on your face as opposed to on your back. Front lit. You learn something new every day here on these things. After I figured out the lighting, then I couldn't find something to write on. So I couldn't write down my little 3 words that will guide me through this organizationally. So I don't know when hotels stopped giving you the little notepads. All this one has is a Bible, no notepad. I don't know when that stopped because I could really use a notepad. It's probably the first time ever I needed that notepad. Be that as it may, we will get through this. You know who gives you a little notepad to write on? I'm quite certain. The Purdue Union Club Hotel. That is our sponsor for this GoldandBlack.com Saturday Simulcast. The Union Club Hotel at Purdue is a Travel + Leisure World's Best Hotel nominee. Voting is open, so visit PurdueUnionClub.com for more details and to show your Purdue pride. All right, here we go. I have to get on topic now because I don't want our YouTube commenters to get upset that I have wasted too much of their time, as they did last week, or the last time I did this by myself. So they're not getting their money's worth on the nothing they pay for this. Purdue basketball recruiting. I am down here in Birmingham, Alabama, basically for 4 days to cover one player. Not exactly a picture of efficiency on my part, but the plans that were in place a couple of weeks ago were elaborate. They were ambitious. Since then, a number of things have happened. A number of avenues have closed down, and the last man standing on my list to cover is Camden Heide. So I am down here solely on Camden Heide watch. Jalen Washington is here in Birmingham. He committed to North Carolina. Josh Dix is here in Birmingham. Purdue excused itself from that recruitment after Camden Heide committed. Ty Rogers is here in Birmingham. I can't really foresee a scenario in which he remains a live recruit for Purdue. So here at the Adidas event here in Birmingham, it's basically just Camden Heide. At one point a long time ago, I was going to bounce back and forth between here and Atlanta. For other recruits, I decided against that because I've seen Braden Smith play 100 times, and I don't need to go to Atlanta to see him play 101 and 102 times. That's bad English. All right, let's get to this. A lot's happened here in the last couple days, one of which is I've actually watched Camden Heide play a couple times for the first time in a year and a half. The whole global health crisis and all that stuff. Myles Colvin committed the other day while I was driving through Horse Cave, Kentucky. Had a story written for like 6 weeks. Commitment comes down when I'm on the highway driving through Horse Cave, Kentucky. A fine place, I'm sure it is. And obviously Jalen Washington fell off the board for Purdue. So I'll go ahead and talk about a bunch of these things. Camden Heide, again, I haven't seen him since 2 springs ago in Dallas. Obviously, as tends to happen with young men when a long period of time expands or passes, he has grown. He was probably 6'4", 6'5" last time I saw him. He's now probably 6'6", 6'7". He's gotten bigger. He's gotten stronger. He's playing stronger. This is a guy who has always played up, meaning he's played up in age group before, and now he's a 17-year-old playing against 17-year-olds for the first time in grassroots anyway. And so far in the 3 games I've seen here, he's shot the ball relatively well, with the exception of 1 game, but he's also looked strong and he's looked athletic, and he's going to be that big wing for Purdue, where he's that 6'6", 6'7" small forward. That's going to be a departure from what Purdue has had here the last few years, because that 3 position is essentially a third guard. It's been either Dakota Mathias, Ryan Klein, or Sasha Stefanovic in that position. Vince Edwards, technically, too, the 1 year he played with Swanigan, or the 2 years he played with Swanigan, whatever it was. But generally, this has been a shooter. And Purdue hasn't been terribly physical at that position. It's not been terribly athletic at that position. All due respect to those guys I mentioned earlier. Vince Edwards, obviously being an exception, he was plenty athletic later in his career, obviously. But Camden Heide is something different than these guys. I think he's a really good shooter. I don't know if I'd put him in the category of a Mathias or a Klein quite yet. I haven't seen him do it enough. I know his reputation is, but I like to see things for myself. But the difference there is that he's so much bigger than those guys. He's quicker than those guys. He's more athletic than those guys. And I think he's just a different type of player than those guys. I think anytime you're dealing with a big wing like that in college basketball, that position is basically a third guard now. And you sit there and you wonder if a guy is 6'6" or 6'7", and 200 pounds or whatever height he's going to be when he gets to Purdue, can he stay in front of a guard? Can he stay in front of somebody who's 6'3" and a lot quicker? And I don't know, but I know he's working on it. He said he's working on his lateral quickness, all that stuff. But also, from a defensive perspective, I think one thing that does matter is size. And he is big. He is really big. And if he is going against smaller people, I think he can occupy more space than he would be if he were, Sasha Stefanovic's, size or something like that, even though Sasha Stefanovic does have a good amount of length to him. And Klein and Mathias were 6'5" each. But I think, something you're going to hear me talk about a little bit, I think, coming into this basketball season as Purdue, looks to kind of make a step forward defensively, is just the concept of size and how, in the absence of, tailor-made lateral quickness, what sort of impact size can have. Just the ability to occupy space. Offense is all about spacing, and room. And defensively, if you can just take away room, if you can take away space, you're doing at least part of your job. And if Purdue's in a position where they're playing one of their 2 centers with Caleb First at the 4 and maybe Trey Kaufman-Wren at the 3, if that's something they do quite a bit this season, I would anticipate they will do it. I don't know if it's going to be their base lineup, something like that. Then you're really big up front. And what you can do in the absence of maybe being tailor-made to stay in front of people is you can just occupy space. I know that's kind of a zone-like concept, and Purdue is not going to play zone, but they're slowly trickling in the direction of a pack line, if you ask me. I don't know if I mean that as something negative or just something they're going to have to, kind of get good at, because I don't know if they're necessarily going to be ideally suited, for dribble penetration, stopping it anyway. And I think you saw what happened to them against Texas State in the NCAA tournament, where the Texas State played really small. They had athletes and shooters all over the floor, and Purdue really struggled to stop them. The reason their season was ended so quickly was simply because they couldn't get the stops they needed to get after I thought they'd overachieved from a defensive perspective all season long. How I went from talking about Camden Heide to talking about broad defensive philosophy at Purdue moving forward, I do not know. But Camden Heide is a good player, a good prospect. I think he's pretty mature physically, and that's not always something Purdue's had a whole lot of on the perimeter over the years. He can get up. He can play above the rim. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be his thing at Purdue, but one of his AU team's bread and butter plays seems to be a backdoor lob for him, where he comes off a down screen and his guy gets gets picked off, and it's there almost every time. It's just a matter of the pass being good. But they have no issues whatsoever trusting Heide to finish that play every time. He's done it a bunch of times here in these first 3 games I've seen, doing it once through contact for a really high level end one in a really big moment, and he's just a different level of athlete than what Purdue has had in that position before. He is part of what might be a bit of a transformation for Purdue on the wing moving forward, because as I mentioned earlier, Myles Colvin committed also for the class of 2023, so he'll come in a class behind Heide, and 2 classes behind Brian Waddell, who we'll see ultimately where he ends up. He's a guy who, as his body develops, will know what position he figures to fit into long term. But Myles Colvin is that legit high-end athlete wing that Purdue never has. Purdue has very rarely had this player where they're a legit 6'5", 6'6", whatever he'll be when he gets to Purdue, 190, 195, whatever he'll be when he gets to Purdue, with good height, good length, and really, really high-level athleticism, but also skill enough to not be a liability in that regard. The only guy who comes to mind athletically that Purdue's had, like Myles Colvin, and with all due apologies to Vince Edwards here, because I thought he was naturally more of a stretch 4 than he was that kind of true wing, is Kelsey Barlow. And Kelsey Barlow was a different level of physical specimen just because he was Gumby. Let's be honest, he was Gumby. He was 6'6", 6'7", but at times he looked like he was about 7'7" because he could those arms and those legs and that ridiculous athleticism. I don't know if that's necessarily Myles Colvin, but he's not far off. But the thing with Kelsey Barlow was, he wasn't a shooting threat, and I think Myles Colvin has shown that he will be a shooting threat. He will be a guy who can score one-on-one people. You put him out in isolation situations on the wing. You get him out in transition, and you're going to have a guy who can make transition threes, but also who can get to the rim and really, really finish. I think he's a guy who's only scratching the surface of what he's going to be as a basketball player. I think his value is going to come out exponentially more later than it does now, because on his high school and AU teams, he is the alpha ball handler, the alpha decision maker, the alpha scorer, and basically the franchise. And when he gets to college and you put him next to some other really good guards, and Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer are ideally suited to make a player like Myles Colvin better because they're such good complementary players. I think you're going to see his value really come out when you can let him kind of unburden himself of all the responsibility he has to have now. I think that he can settle into like a 3-and-D sort of role, that big true wing. You look at what Mikal Bridges is doing for the Suns right now. I'm not comparing him to Bridges. I'm just saying that sort of player who can guard a lot of different people because he's got great height and great length, but also can make open threes, score a little bit in isolation, that kind of thing. I think Purdue's got a guy who can fill those categories kind of coming up in Myles Colvin. And I think, he's got a lot of development left to go, but I think his ceiling is very, very high. And I think he and Camden Heide combined are part of almost a transformation on the wing for Purdue, where Purdue's going to be bigger, Purdue's going to be more athletic, Purdue's going to be more physical, especially when it comes to Camden Heide. And I'm sure that Myles Colvin is not going to back down from contact when he gets to the college level, because I think relishing contact probably runs in his bloodlines. But it is going to be a really interesting thing to see, because I do think this represents kind of a transformation for Purdue. From a personnel perspective, these two guys combined, again, we'll see what Brian Waddell becomes. We'll see what Trey Kaufman-Renn winds up being in terms of his ability to play the three a little bit. That's what I got on those two guys. And then just, again, had I had notes, my notes would be telling me right now to just talk about where Purdue is in the process right now. The class of 2022, Purdue, as you are well aware, has 3 commitments now in Camden Heide, Fletcher Lawyer, and Braden Smith. They have at least one more scholarship to give. I would anticipate them looking to go to 5 if they can get the right 5. But at this point, I think I'm not sure what the right 5 would look like because the right 5 for the last few months was almost certain to have to include Jalen Washington. That obviously is not the case anymore. I would anticipate Purdue going all in on finding a big man in this class because Travion Williams will be gone after this year, and the other guy you have just scored like 24 points and had 15 rebounds this morning against Spain in international competition. His future in basketball is very bright, Zach Edey, that is, of course. So betting on having him 4 years might not be an ideal bet to lay money on. I'm not saying necessarily that he's as high a probability guy to go early as I'd probably anticipate Jaden Ivey being, whether it be this year or next year. But I think you have to plan for all scenarios. And if something happens with Zach Edey a year after Travion Williams leaves, or even in the best case scenario, for all involved now, or after this year, I don't want to get your hopes up here. But I'm just, coaches have to prepare for this kind of stuff where you just don't know. And the last thing you want to do if you're Purdue is go from having 2 great centers every year for like 10 years in a row to not really having any. You'll still have Caleb First in the program. I do think he's a more natural 5, probably at the college level, than he's a 4. But he's going to play some 4 this year, and now all of a sudden you're sitting here and you're having to move over a power forward to play center for you on the fly because you have no other centers because they're all gone. So I think it'd be really important for Purdue to get a center in this class, somebody who might not need to play right away, but wouldn't be a total slouch either if they have to. Purdue has offered and hosted for an official visit Terrace Reed from St. Louis. Ohio State's in on that one. Michigan's in on that one. Everything I hear about this kid is he's unbelievable, and he's better than the level he's being recruited at. So we'll see what happens this summer for him if, anybody else comes in who really can shake up his recruitment. But Purdue's at least had him on campus for an official visit. They'll keep recruiting him. They'll keep watching him. Keba Jai, the big man from La Lumiere who plays with Fletcher Lawyer in grassroots, as a player Purdue's watching very closely, had booked for an official visit. Some things came up. They had to postpone. That'll probably happen in August or September now. One of the first stop I think this evaluation period Matt Painter made was Indianapolis to watch him and Fletcher Lawyer play. I take it back. Painter started in Atlanta, but then once Jai and Fletcher Lawyer started playing in Indy, he came right to Indy for their first game. So I shouldn't say he started in Indy because he didn't. But he got there as soon as he could see them play. So I think they're watching him real close. I wouldn't be surprised at all. In fact, I expected them to offer him in June. Now that they've been able to see him play live, provided he doesn't fall all over himself, I think that there's a real good chance Purdue will move on him as well. And I think if they offer him, I have no reason to think he would be a certainty for Purdue, but I think they'd have a pretty good chance at him. I think he's kind of tailor-made for Purdue personally as a player and as a individual. And I've seen him play more than anyone, probably, other than probably his father. So that's definitely a name to keep an eye on, Keba Jai. Purdue could really use another guard, a more athletic guard, a playmaker, so to speak, somebody who can, generate offense for themselves, a Jaden Ivey type, a Carson Edwards type. Obviously, you don't just go to the store and get a Jaden Ivey or a Carson Edwards. It's just not that easy. I'm not saying you have to go get somebody that good, but I'm saying you have to get somebody who can do a little bit off the dribble, who can create a little bit, who can put pressure on defenses, things like that, because you got to start preparing for life after Jaden Ivey also. As much as fans probably don't want to hear that, that's just the reality of it. I don't think anybody has any disillusionment over what Purdue has on its hands with Jaden Ivey in terms of how good he can be and what that could mean for his long-term viability at Purdue. But I think finding somebody who can replace sort of that dynamic, or at least help ease the loss of that dynamic element would be something they'd be very open to. That was a priority early on, and my screen just went to sleep. That is the worst insult ever that a computer can give you. I don't know who that would be, but they have all summer to watch these guys play, find somebody new. Or if you only sign 4 guys in 2022, you hold over another scholarship to 2023, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world either, because as of right now, I think Purdue has only like 1 or 2 scholarships for 2023. Myles Colvin just took one. So that's a big chunk of your class right there. And, from a balance perspective, but also a depth. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. You don't necessarily, very rarely do you want to have 1-player classes. Just doesn't seem like the ideal thing. So it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to spread those scholarships out a little bit. But you have to get the right guys. You can't just take guys and look at your numbers and say, all right, we're good. So that's what I've got, I think. I don't really even know what's left to say. I hope our YouTube commenters got their money's worth here for the nothing they pay for this. This is Brian Neubert from GoldandBlack.com, once again with your Saturday Simulcast. If you listen to this on Sunday, just pretend it's Saturday. I have a couple more days here in Birmingham, reveling in basketball, barbecue, and probably the Delta variant. So wish me luck here over my next few days here in Birmingham. Really looking forward to that 8-hour drive home on Sunday. Why I drove, I have no idea. It seemed like such a good idea to control my itinerary, and now it just seems like the worst decision I've made in quite a while. But hell, I was holed up for a year and a half like everybody else, so it feels good to just be anywhere. So this has been, once again, your GoldandBlack.com Saturday Simulcast, brought to you by our friends at the Purdue Union Club Hotel. Please check them out. I hope the thrilling, luxurious background here gives you an idea of how much better things almost certainly are at the Purdue Union Club Hotel. I've heard unbelievable things about the place. You need to go check it out. Go to their website, look at the pictures. I think you'll be very impressed. So thanks everybody.